Now, if one serving president is warning of World War III, a former president is predicting a bloodbath if he is not elected again. You guessed it. We are talking about Donald Trump. Over the weekend, Trump claimed if he does not win November's presidential election, it will mean the likely end of American democracy. He said, if we don't win this election, I don't think you're going to have another election in this country. And then in the middle of his speech, where he was talking about placing tariffs on imported cars and foreign competition for the US auto industry, Trump declared, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the auto industry and for the country. President Joe Biden's campaign lashed on to Trump's use of the word bloodbath, saying the former president wants another 6th January. They said this is Donald Trump, a loser who gets beaten by over 7 million votes and then instead of appealing to a wider mainstream audience, doubles down on his threats of political violence. They also said this reflected Trump's extremism, his thirst for revenge and his threats of political violence. The Trump campaign shot back saying the former president was speaking about auto workers. Trump has been endlessly slamming Biden on immigration and the economy and repeating accusations that the 2020 election was stolen due to widespread voter fraud. He repeated his promise to free the people who've been charged with crimes related to the 6th January 2021 attack on the Capitol. Trump called those assailants and hooligans patriots and hostages. He went on to characterize undocumented immigrants who commit crimes as animals. The former president has made it clear that he seeks to make immigration and the border campaign wedge issues and has proposed hardline immigration policies including mass detentions and deportations. He's also repeatedly used dehumanizing language to refer to migrants, including saying they were poisoning the blood of our country, echoing words used by Adolf Hitler. Now, at a weekend Washington event, President Biden said, we live in an unprecedented moment in democracy, an unprecedented moment for history. Democracy and freedom are literally under attack. Putin's on the march in Europe. My predecessor bows down to him and says to him, do whatever the hell you want. Now, according to a new Reuters Ipsos poll, President Biden has a marginal 1 percentage point lead over Donald Trump ahead of the November presidential election. Some 39% of the registered voters in the one-week poll said they would vote for Biden, a Democrat, if the election was held today, compared with 38% who picked Republican former President Trump. Many voters remain undecided, with 11% saying they would vote for other candidates and 5% saying they would not vote at all. And then there is a 7% that says, well, they don't quite know what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Mike Pence, who served as Donald Trump's vice president for 4 years, has said he will not endorse his former boss for the upcoming presidential election. Pence served Trump loyally but publicly broke with the former Republican president over his role in the 6th January riot at the US Capitol by Trump supporters.
If this election isn't won, I'm not sure that you'll ever have another election in this country. Does that make sense? I don't think you're going to have another election in this country. If we don't win this election, I don't think you're going to have another election, or certainly not an election that's meaningful. And you know what? We'll do things with Ukraine. We should loan them the money, not send them the money. We should loan them the money so that if they do make it, they're against tremendous odds. But if they make it, they pay us back. Loan them the money. Give it to them as a loan. Let them be a little bit like they have to be a little nice. Loan them the money. Don't just hand them a check for $60 billion. I tell you, Zelensky's one of the greatest salesmen in history. Every time he comes to the country, he walks away with $50 or $60 billion. Thank you very much, Ohio. We love you. Thank you. God bless you all.
Okay, let's go back to my guests, Professor Scott Lucas and Fred Weir. Professor Lucas, starting with you. One serving president is threatening to start World War III, and a former president who could become president again of the most powerful country in the world is saying there could be a bloodbath in his country's auto industry and in the country itself if he is not re-elected as president. And then he says, if I'm not re-elected, this country may not have another election. Well, quite rich for Donald Trump to say that, given his role in the 6th January Capitol riots. But frankly, how dangerous is this?
Let's connect the two stories that you've covered. before the break, we heard your esteemed guest, including Mr. Weir, defend Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin portrayed himself not as an aggressor, but as a victim. I'm the one who's been hurt here. I'm the one who faces the West and NATO, and I face colonialist and interventionist. And Putin hopes that people will buy that rhetoric, that he's the one that's just simply defending himself, even as he attacks other countries, even as he threatens World War III, even as he tries to crush civil society in Russia. Donald Trump does the same thing. Donald Trump will threaten all his enemies. He will say, I will be a dictator from day one. He has been convicted in civil court of sexual assault. He has been convicted of massive fraud. His Trump organization has been convicted of business malpractice. He faces 88 felony counts. Just beyond that, take out his stances on all the issues, including the issue of trying to overturn the 2020 election. But what he'll then say is, I'm the victim. I'm the victim. You have to defend me against the deep state. And then he says, if you don't defend me as the victim, you know what's going to happen? There'll be a bloodbath. It's the same type of aggressive bullying, misinformation, disinformation, lies, and blackmail that's being carried out in Russia. But the difference is, in America, you have a system which for 250 years has tried to stand up against that and being a democracy. This is the biggest challenge for the United States, the biggest challenge in peacetime since the end of the Civil War in 1865.
Okay, again, a very dark prognosis, but then you're not alone in saying that. President Biden has said time and again, democracy is under assault. Let me take this to Fred Weir. Fred Weir, like I said, one serving president is threatening to start World War III, and a former president who could be elected president again, and this isn't just any country, this is the, well, oldest democracy in the world and the most powerful country in the world. He says, if you're not going to elect me, there's going to be a bloodbath. I mean, it's as deranged as it sounds. Actually, it sounds pretty scary and dangerous, and it only seems to lend credence to what his opponents and critics say, that if Donald Trump returns, there is going to be a very serious threat to American democracy. And then there are those like Professor Lucas who say, come to think of it, Putin and Trump are two sides of the same coin. No wonder they seem to get along rather well. And then you've also had Trump recently saying, I will encourage Putin to attack whoever the hell he wants to attack if NATO allies don't pay up.
Well, I should point out that I'm a Canadian. I grew up in Toronto, where we had 3 American TV stations and 3 Canadian ones. So we Canadians have a certain intimacy with American political culture, and we always have been in horror of it. It's always been racial tensions and mass shootings, guns, and Wild West economics to us Canadians, and we're their neighbors. It's gotten markedly worse. I've been away for a long time, but I watch, from a distance, and it seems to me that American democracy is unraveling. Probably Trump is a symptom of that, not the agent of it. That's one point of view, is that he's the cause. He's the one who's stampeding through the system, smashing everything up. And they will say, Democrats will say, if Trump is elected, that's probably the last election we'll have. Now Trump is turning that around, and he has always used extreme rhetoric. He's always shooting from the lip. He is that kind of a politician, and I'm sure he's very dangerous. But I don't think he's the root problem in America. I think the American system and American democracy is going haywire. And even as a Canadian who always thought that about them, I'm sure it's much, much worse. As for Trump and Putin, I never thought there was much to that. There's very little indication that they ever got along. And Russian foreign policy experts in this town had the worst 4 years of their lives while Trump was president of the United States. All their hopes, and they did have hopes originally based on things that Trump said about how I'm going to get along with Putin and so on, but actually things were much, much worse under when Trump was there, partly because it was just chaos in Washington. But when Putin said the other day that he would probably prefer Biden to Trump as the next president, he might have been trolling the Americans, because
Yes, many believe he
any
was just doing
yeah,
this to rile them up.
any endorsement Putin gives is like the kiss of death. Okay,
Yes.
that's true. But he might have also been just sincere. Russians do want predictability and some kind of reliability, even if it's hostile, in their American counterpart.
Okay, that's very interesting. I certainly believe that he said what he did about preferring Biden over Trump to essentially rile up the American president and the Democrats. But let me take this back to Professor Lucas. Professor Lucas, you say that American democracy is robust because the institutions are robust, and it is the institutions that have ensured for a very long time, for centuries, that democracy in that country is preserved. That is how it is the world's oldest democracy. However, if you listen to Fred Weir, he says, I am truly worried for American democracy today. He seems to think it is unraveling, not only because the man who's making these deranged and downright dangerous statements today, not only is he in the running to be the next president of the United States of America, he has been president of United States for a full 4-year term. And we saw the kind of turmoil that created not just in the US, but I would say globally. And then came 6th January 2021. And Professor Lucas, honestly, I think each one of us was so stunned by what happened that day that, there were many who turned around and said that the United States of America goes around lecturing the rest of the world on the virtues of democracy, on how to have smooth transition of power and free and fair elections. And look what is happening there. I'm not trying to echo what Putin has said, but fact is that we were all deeply worried when we saw those scenes on Capitol Hill on the 6th of January.
Oh, I'm worried too. But here's the difference between me and Vladimir Putin, and indeed Fred Weir. Fred Weir doesn't speak for Canadians when he says, oh, they're all horrified by what the US has been, what it could be. Fred Weir is just speaking for Fred Weir because he's in Moscow. Yes, America has had issues with racism throughout its history. I'm from Alabama. I know firsthand what it's like to be in a segregated area. But the United States also in 2009 had a black president, Barack Obama, a man of Kenyan ancestry, who came to the highest office in the land, something I thought I would never see. Yes, America has had issues with women's rights. It continues to have issues with women's rights because of the rollback, for example, of abortion rights. But it also in 2018 had the largest cross-section of women representatives who are there to make the country better, and who are continuing to stand up to Trump, to stand up to the Trumpists, and to stand up to those who encourage the Trumpists, like Vladimir Putin. Yes, America's had problems in the past in terms of ethnicities and in terms of people coming into the country. But you know what? It has been a place where many Indians have come and many Indians have prospered. It is now a country that has its first Muslim American representatives, its first Hindu American representatives. Yes, America is challenged, but at its grassroots with its people, they want better health care. They want to deal with immigration in a humane, decent fashion. They want better education. They want economic progress. And they want to defend countries in the world like Ukraine, who are facing aggression from outside. It is a challenge to the American system, but you know what? It is always darkest before the dawn. And if we can avoid the catastrophe of Trump being elected in November, and if Congress actually returns to a sane place, then yes, America can progress again. and Russia's propaganda and all the prognostications that come from there can be put where they rightfully belong.
Okay, good to know that you continue to have unflinching faith in American democracy, and come to think of it, it is a beacon for the rest of the world as well. I'll give you the last word, Fred Weir. Whose narrative is likely to sell better, in your opinion, come the 5th of November? There is Donald Trump, who is obviously, tapping into Americans' xenophobia, indulging in a lot of fear-mongering, hoping to make immigration the central and most key issue in this election, never mind that he has multiple criminal cases against him. And on the other hand, there is President Biden, who is hoping to make it all about democracy. He is saying, if you do not want to see the end of American democracy, you do not want Donald Trump in the White House for one more term, you want to bring me back, however old I may be, however forgetful I may be, whatever my immigration policies may be, and whatever my stand on the Israel-Hamas war may be. Which narrative is likely to emerge stronger, you think, 8 months from now?
Very hard to say, but let me say that as a Canadian, we do have this certain edge about the United States, but we also admire the place greatly and travel there, feel at home. It's a wonderful country, a great country, and I wasn't taking any pleasure from the thought that American democracy might be unraveling. And in fact, if I were an American, I would probably be a Democrat. Or something to the left of Democrats. I would never be a supporter of Trump. So that said, I do see that the country is split. The poll that you cited had Biden ahead by a point, but there are other polls out there, and that show Trump ahead by 2 or 3 points. It's awfully close, and in a country where the electorate is that deeply split, it doesn't seem to me that it's helpful to demonize each other. I mean, if half the population of your country are damned Putinists, insurrectionists, you've got a big problem. And I see that in the rhetoric of this election campaign on both sides. It's not just Trump and his over-the-top language. It's also Democrats and the way they are characterizing this as the end of the world if Trump wins. It wasn't the end of the world in 2016, and it wouldn't be if he gets elected in 2024. But America has an awful lot of problems that it needs to address. And all along the lines that Professor Lucas was suggesting, better health care, better order, getting infrastructure built. I mean, he was talking about progressive things that I would endorse, and I think what Americans want. So let's hope that sanity and unity prevail in November. But as for predicting the vote, I can't do that.
All right. Well, I agree that it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. None of us have a crystal ball. And as polls suggest, this is going to be a very, very close contest. But one thing that I agree with you on 100% is we all want to see sanity prevail. We all want to see reason prevail. And we certainly all want to see democracy prevail at the end of the day. The world needs more democracy and not less. Gentlemen, Professor Scott Lucas and Fred Weir, it's been an absolute pleasure having this lengthy discussion with both of you on these two men, the tale of two presidents, if I may put it that way. Thank you very much.